Hey everyone, Nigel here. If you tuned into our video earlier this week, then you'll know that for our last compilation series to round out the holiday season, we decided to take a look at some of the many cases we've covered over the years from the weird and wild state of Florida. This is the second and final part of that compilation, but if you haven't seen the first, we'll leave a link in the description below. Just a heads up, we'll be back next week with all new editions of Crimes of the Week and Crimes of the Week International, so be sure to check those out as well. As always, one thing to keep in mind is that these segments have not been edited since they appeared in their respective lists, so references to specific days of the week as well as other small details may no longer apply. Also, yes, we know that we said Florida Man in the title, but we've also included plenty of Florida women on here as well. With that out of the way, this is Crimes of the Week, the Florida Man Compilation, Part 2. If you're a regular viewer of our Crimes of the Week series, then you might remember that a few weeks back, we brought you the story of Omar Ortega, a 46-year-old Utah man who stole an excavator and used it to destroy part of a grocery store parking lot in Salt Lake City for seemingly no reason. Well, despite the bizarre nature of that case, it seems that Ortega is not alone after all. As it turns out, on the very same day, at least one other man went on a similar unprompted rampage. According to reports, the incident took place on the morning of August 6th, when authorities in Flagler County, Florida received reports about a man wreaking havoc with a piece of construction equipment. The equipment in question was a JLG lull, a type of large material handler used in construction, agriculture, and manufacturing. The man behind the wheel of the heavy machinery was later identified as a 56-year-old homeless man named Randy Lee Wieland. According to police, Wieland stole the $60,000 lull from a construction site at around 8 a.m. that morning, then drove it roughly 2.5 miles to the city of Beverly Beach. Along the way, he ran over 2 fire hydrants, a Charter Communications fiber node, residential mailboxes, and broke apart several sections of public sidewalk. Thankfully, police were soon able to catch up with Wieland thanks to calls from the public, and he was placed under arrest. Flagler County Sheriff Rick Staley later thanked those that had tipped them off about the crime, offering a, quote, "special thank you to the citizens who called us and helped prevent this dirtbag from continuing his dangerous path of destruction." While calling Wieland a dirtbag may seem a bit harsh, apparently this kind of behavior from him is hardly unprecedented. The 56-year-old has a long criminal history in both Pennsylvania and Florida, with convictions for criminal mischief, burglary, public drunkenness, grand theft auto, boating under the influence, battery on a law enforcement officer, impersonating a law enforcement officer, battery on a person over 65, and exploitation of the elderly less than $20,000, to name a few. In connection with this recent incident, Wieland has been charged with grand theft, theft from a construction site, felony criminal mischief, and trespass on a construction site. He is currently being held on a $12,500 bond. Authorities in Monroe County, Florida say that a 19-year-old woman has been given the legal equivalent of a slap on the wrist this week after she offered a bizarre explanation for her recent behavior at a recent traffic stop. According to reports, the incident began on the morning of May 12th of this year, when an officer with the Monroe County Sheriff's Office spotted a woman speeding and driving recklessly in Key Largo. The woman was traveling at about 90 miles per hour, so the officer decided to conduct a traffic stop. However, when the officer turned on his siren and lights, the woman, later identified as 19-year-old Jania Chimerical Douglas, did not stop. Instead, she led the officer on a 5-mile car chase, during which time she could be seen noticeably looking back at the patrol car that was chasing her. The pursuit came to an end at a 3-way intersection when another police officer laid down some spike strips. Douglas reportedly stopped before running over the spikes. When questioned about her behavior, Douglas initially claimed that she was late for her job as a housekeeping supervisor at a local resort. However, when the officer pressed her on this, saying that if she had simply stopped when he requested, all she would have ended up with was a citation at worst, She reportedly responded that, quote, being arrested for something simple had always been on her bucket list. According to the officer who conducted the stop, she actually mentioned this a few times, and fortunately for her, he was able to grant her wish. According to reports, Douglas has no prior criminal history, and so was given a deal by prosecutors. In addition to serving 96 hours of community service, paying $750 in court fees, and writing a letter of apology, if she stays out of trouble for the next 12 months, authorities have agreed to dismiss the felony charges against her. Authorities in Marion County, Florida say that a self-described sociopath is in custody and is facing 2 charges of attempted murder this week after she allegedly tried to kill both of her roommates and then went out on a casual shopping trip as if nothing had happened. According to reports, the incident began at around 8 a.m. on September 16th when deputies from the Marion County Sheriff's Office responded to a 911 call from a man in the Leeward Air Ranch subdivision, located a short drive southeast of the city of Ocala. The man said that he had been stabbed and was, quote, fading fast. When officers arrived at the scene, they discovered that there were, in fact, 2 victims, the man who had originally called them, plus a woman. Both had sustained multiple serious stab wounds, but were able to give police the name of their attacker before being rushed to the hospital. They claimed that it had been their roommate, 30-year-old Christina Ann Adams. Not long after, police were able to stop Adams in her car just a short distance away from the crime scene. Though Adams initially denied any involvement in the stabbings, according to investigators, she eventually offered a chilling confession. Adams reportedly told police that she had planned to kill her roommates ever since they informed her that she would have to move out 2 months prior. She hadn't done anything at the time they initially brought the subject up, but on the morning of the attacks, one of the victims allegedly told Adams that the time had come and they wanted her moved out by the following day. After this conversation, Adams reportedly put on long pants, a jacket, gloves, and shoe covers, then grabbed a 9-inch long knife and some sort of taser pen. She then attacked both the male and female victims, stabbing each of them numerous times until she believed that they were dead. At this point, Adams allegedly attempted to clean up the crime scene, throwing several items in the washing machine, changing her clothes, and washing her knife in a bucket full of bleach. She then left the residence as if nothing had happened, traveling to a grocery store before meeting up with someone else to go shopping. She was on her way home when she was stopped by police. During questioning, Adams reportedly told officers that she's a sociopath and believes that she has an undiagnosed dissociative identity disorder. She has now been charged with 2 counts of attempted first-degree murder, as well as tampering with evidence. At the time of this recording, both of Adams's victims reportedly remain in the hospital in critical condition. Neither of them have been identified by name. Authorities in Brevard County, Florida say that 2 men are in custody this week following a dangerous and violent incident at a local hotel, which nearly cost the life of a police officer. According to reports, the incident began sometime on September 9th, when management at the Suburban Lodge Extended Stay Hotel in the city of Melbourne were alerted about a 911 hang-up call in one of their rooms. When staff went and knocked at the door of the room, they reportedly heard a man inside yell, quote, "There are a bunch of armed gunmen, and I'm going to die." Understandably, the hotel employees contacted local police, who went to check the situation out. After knocking at the door once again, police were reportedly spoken to from inside by a man named Lucas Alves. Alves refused to open the door for officers and repeatedly asked for their badge numbers, which they provided. He continued to be uncooperative until out of nowhere he started counting down from 3. When he got to 0, he fired a gun through the door, hitting one of the officers in the chest. Police exchanged additional fire with Alves, who reportedly continued to shoot without discretion. Thankfully, no one else was injured, and Alves and another man who was with him in the room were eventually placed under arrest. Following his arrest, Alves offered a bizarre explanation for the unprovoked shooting. He claimed that he had only shot at police because he thought they were Mexican drug cartel members. No information was provided as to why Alves thought this was the case, though it's possible he was under the influence of drugs at the time of the incident. The officer who was shot in the chest was thankfully also okay, as his bulletproof vest did its job, leaving him bruised, but otherwise not seriously harmed. That day just so happened to be his 26th anniversary with the Melbourne police as well. According to reports, Alves is now facing 3 counts of attempted first-degree premeditated murder of a law enforcement officer, 1 count of shooting into an occupied building, and 1 count of use of a firearm during a felony. Authorities in Pinellas County, Florida say that a 23-year-old man has pleaded guilty to a felony charge this week after he was involved in a bizarre and dangerous incident last year in which he led police on a high-speed chase to impress a woman. According to reports, the situation began on the night of August 28, 2021, when a man, later identified as then 22-year-old Taylor Beverly, was observed by police in Clearwater blowing through a red light at the intersection of Chestnut Street and South Myrtle Avenue. As he did this, Beverly apparently turned around and made eye contact with officers from his white 2017 Suzuki motorcycle before speeding off. Though police attempted to make a stop, Beverly refused to pull over, continuing to fly through red lights and weave through traffic at speeds of well over 100 miles per hour. Because the chase quickly became dangerous, officers called off their pursuit, but put out a notice for other law enforcement in the area to be on the lookout. Beverly was eventually caught just before 10 p.m. that same night. At the time of his arrest, Beverly offered a bizarre excuse for his behavior, stating that he had been trying to show off for the female passenger who was also on his motorcycle. He said that the two of them were on a first date. It turned out that police were not the only ones who did not see the humor in the situation, though. The woman herself stated that she had been screaming at Beverly to stop throughout the chase, but that he had refused to do so. Beverly ultimately pleaded guilty to a fleeing or eluding charge, and this week was sentenced to 2 months in jail. In addition to the jail time, the 23-year-old's license was suspended for a year, and he was ordered to pay about $700 in court fees and fines. Apparently, this is not the first time Beverly has been in trouble with the law. In addition to prior convictions for grand theft, cocaine possession, and passing a bad check, the 23-year-old was also cited for reckless driving and driving an unregistered vehicle following a 2019 motorcycle crash. Authorities in Sumter County, Florida say that a father and daughter are facing charges this week after they attacked a fellow family member during the middle of dinner. A brawl which allegedly began because of a minor misunderstanding over Chinese food. According to reports, the incident took place on the evening of September 16th in the appropriately named city of Wildwood. It began when the Shell family made the decision to order some Chinese takeout food for dinner. When the food arrived, the mother of the family, who has not been identified by name, said she wasn't hungry and went into another room of the house. She was there for approximately 15 minutes until she heard loud crashing and yelling sounds coming from the kitchen. The mother arrived to find her son in a 2-on-1 tag team situation with her husband, 51-year-old Bruce, and her daughter, 25-year-old Atlantis. Bruce had the boy in a headlock while Atlantis was repeatedly punching him in the face. The mother screamed for them both to stop, but this was apparently ignored until she went ahead and called 911. When police arrived at the Shell home, the bizarre reason behind the violent incident was revealed by the victim, who had bruises to his face and noticeable red marks on his neck. He explained that when the Chinese food had arrived that evening, his father had flown into a rage because there were no labels on the containers. He was in the middle of fuming about this when he learned that his son had eaten his food by a mistake due to the mix-up. Apparently, this prompted the victim's father and sister to attack. According to reports, Bruce and Atlantis were both arrested on misdemeanor battery charges. Bruce has also since been slapped with domestic battery by strangulation, which is a felony. While both of the accused have now been bonded out of jail, It doesn't take a fortune cookie to predict that the pair could soon find themselves back behind bars fairly soon. Authorities in Pinellas County, Florida say that a hapless thief is in custody this week after he resorted to using a literal handgun to hold up a local bank. According to reports, the incident took place at around 1:25 p.m. on October 10th, when 56-year-old Paul James Sinclair walked into a Chase Bank branch in the city of Seminole. After approaching one of the tellers, he held his hand in the shape of a gun, stuck it underneath his shirt, and demanded that she hand over cash. Surprisingly, this tactic was actually somewhat successful, and the teller handed Sinclair $120 before sending him on his way. Unfortunately for the 56-year-old, his triumph was extremely short-lived, as police caught up to him just 11 minutes later. Thankfully, he didn't try to go out finger guns blazing, and was easily taken into custody and is now facing robbery charges. Reports jokingly state that no weapons or fingers were seized from St. Clair at the time of his arrest, which, if nothing else, means that he still ended up better off than this week's alleged home invader from North Carolina. He is currently being held in the county jail in lieu of a $10,000 bond. Authorities in Brevard County, Florida say that a 29-year-old mother is facing multiple charges this week after she allegedly had a total meltdown outside of her child's school, at one point threatening to blow it up. According to reports, the situation began sometime on October 5th, when 29-year-old Tiffany Marie Perazzi allegedly began to cause a disturbance while waiting to pick up her child outside their school in the city of Melbourne. At first, she was issued a traffic citation. However, things started to escalate when she reportedly freaked out about the citation and was issued a second ticket, this time a warning for trespassing. She was then told by a school resource officer that she would have to leave the property and make other arrangements to pick her child up from school. The news reportedly sent Perazzi into a full-blown rage, causing her to throw the trespass warning out of her car window. She then proceeded to call the school principal, threatening to, quote, punch and beat her butt if she didn't fix the situation. When this proved futile, Perazzi upped the ante once again, calling 911. While on the phone with dispatchers, she reportedly stated, quote, I need someone to meet me at the school, and if someone don't help me get my child, I will blow this bitch up. Predictably, these threats only dug Perazzi further into a hole, sending her child's school into lockdown and causing her to be arrested by police when officers arrived to investigate the situation. She has now been charged with falsely reporting a bomb, fleeing and eluding police, disturbing a school function, and operating a vehicle without a valid license. Speaking about Perazzi's actions after the incident, Brevard County Sheriff Wayne Ivey stated that he and his department would not tolerate any threats on school campuses. He also jokingly stated that he didn't expect Perazzi to be nominated for any Mother of the Year awards at her child's school. Authorities in Marion County, Florida say that they recently dealt with quite the bizarre and dangerous traffic stop recently when they pulled over a man with serious damage to his vehicle, only for him to blame it on some sort of curse before threatening and attacking police officers. According to reports, the incident began at around 4 a.m. on October 23rd, when officers from the Marion County Sheriff's Office noticed a suspicious vehicle traveling on a northbound on-ramp of the I-75 near the community of Marion Oaks. The car's hazard lights were on, and it was tilted to one side, appearing like both of the tires on the driver's side were deflated. However, when police conducted a traffic stop and got a closer look, they realized that the tires were not simply deflated. They were completely ripped to shreds, and the man behind the wheel was driving on what remained of the rims. When questioned about the bizarre situation, the driver, later identified as 29-year-old Andres Orjuela Montalegre, offered a strange and nonsensical explanation. He claimed that someone had placed a curse on him, and that he had hit a curb too hard. He reportedly went on to say that this left him with a, quote, do-or-die choice: drive home without tires, or set his car on fire and sleep on the median of the highway. I mean, come on. We've all been there before, right? Anyway, according to police, things started to make a little more sense when they asked Montalegre to step out of his vehicle and noticed that he was very unsteady on his feet. They suspected that he was driving under the influence. Much to the chagrin of the officers, the 29-year-old was apparently intent on sticking to his initial story, though. He repeated his claims that someone had put a curse on him before saying that the damage to his car was the result of, quote, paranormal activity. He then began to threaten the officers, telling one of them, quote, if you mess with me right now, let me tell you something. I'm going to break your head with a baseball bat. He then allegedly told the same officer that he was going to skin him alive. As you might imagine, this made performing roadside sobriety tests quite difficult. In fact, police reportedly had to abandon this effort altogether when Montalegre allegedly spat on two of them, then grabbed for one of their tasers while they were wiping the saliva off. Needless to say, this was the point at which he was arrested, though apparently not before kicking multiple officers while being carried to the back of a patrol car. Montalegre reportedly refused to cooperate once again after being taken to jail, and was subsequently charged with 2 counts of battery on a law enforcement officer, resisting an officer with violence, attempt to deprive an officer of means of protection or communication, corrupt by threats against a public servant, and of course, driving under the influence. Montalegre is currently being held on $27,000 bond, and if convicted on all of the charges, reportedly faces up to 25.5 years in prison. Authorities in Brevard County, Florida say that a 29-year-old man is facing charges this week after he tried to play a real-life game of Frogger on one of the state's busiest highways in an ill-fated attempt to escape police. According to reports, the incident took place sometime recently when a deputy from the Brevard County Sheriff's Office noticed a man driving at a reckless rate of speed on the I-95. The man, later identified as 29-year-old Zachary Siebert, was clocked going at around 110 miles per hour. Not only that, he was driving with a suspended license. While Siebert did pull over for the deputy when signaled to, much to the officers' dismay, they soon discovered that it wasn't because the 29-year-old was planning to cooperate. Instead, immediately after stopping his vehicle, Siebert got out, yelled a quick apology, and then ran across the busy highway. After managing to miraculously avoid oncoming traffic on both sides of the interstate, he then disappeared into an adjacent forest. Unfortunately for Siebert, though his manners were top-notch and he was apparently pretty good at dodging cars, he wasn't so great when it came to dodging cops. After waiting just a short time, he apparently flagged down a driver and offered to pay him to take him back to where he had left his car. Police were, of course, still searching the area, and Siebert was allegedly discovered hiding in the back seat of this other driver's car while on his way back. Siebert is now facing several charges, including driving with a suspended license and resisting without violence. As the great philosopher Jamie Foxx once said, blame it on the alcohol. Well, that's precisely what one Florida man allegedly tried to do this week, much to the chagrin of unamused police officers. According to reports, the incident began at around 5 p.m. on December 7th, when authorities in Hernando County received multiple calls about a vehicle fire in the parking lot of an apartment complex in the community of Spring Hill. It turned out that the burning vehicle in question was one of the department's own, a marked SUV that had been deliberately set alight. Officers discovered this after the fire had been extinguished, when they found the remnants of a bag of trash which had been wedged under the vehicle's gas tank and had been the obvious source of the flames. Luckily, the alleged culprit, a man named Anthony Thomas Tarduno, spared police the trouble of having to track him down. He reportedly walked right up to them at the scene and confessed. Tarduno explained that a little while earlier, he had been drinking at a local bar and had gone out to stretch his legs. When he stumbled across the Hernando County Sheriff's vehicle in the parking lot, he decided he'd like to set it on fire. So, after retrieving a bag of garbage from a nearby dumpster, he did just that, making sure to light the bag and wedge it right under the SUV's gas tank for maximum effect. This was evidently a success, as it not only severely damaged the vehicle, but also another random car that happened to be parked close by. Once the vehicle was up in flames, Tarduno apparently walked back to the bar to keep drinking, though at some point said he felt guilty, so he decided to come back. He attempted to explain his actions by stating that he was intoxicated, and that he, quote, does stupid things when he's drunk. That being said, Tarduno wanted the police to know it was nothing personal. After referring to himself as a, quote, professional arsonist, he said that he didn't target the police SUV for any particular reason, and probably would have set any vehicle on fire that had been parked there. Tarduno was rewarded for his refreshing candor by being arrested on the spot and charged with 2 counts of arson. Authorities in Polk County, Florida say that a couple of suspected burglars are facing charges this week after one of them apparently made the bizarre choice to call 911 during the middle of one of their alleged crimes. According to reports, the situation began sometime in the early morning hours of New Year's Eve when police in the community of Poinciana received a call about a burglary at a local Dollar General store. By the time officers arrived at the scene, the perpetrators had fled, but thanks to the store's surveillance cameras, they were able to identify one of the suspects, a 23-year-old man named Martin Gonzalez Garcia. While authorities initially weren't sure where to find Martin, their luck continued just a few hours later when police received a mysterious 911 call. The caller hung up before saying anything, but authorities were able to trace the call to a local residence. They arrived at the scene to find an unsecured door, which they entered through to see if everything was okay. Once inside, officers quickly came face to face with none other than Martin, as well as his girlfriend, 22-year-old Liz Roldan Ocasio. The two were allegedly in the middle of another burglary, only this time, bizarrely, they had called the cops on themselves. According to police, an explanation behind the whole strange series of events was reportedly offered by Liz after she and Martin were taken into custody. The 22-year-old admitted that she had been the one who had made the mysterious hang-up 911 call. The reason? She said that she had planned to ask police for help moving their belongings, aka the items they were allegedly stealing from the house. Oh yeah, and she and Martin needed a ride to the airport because they had planned to spend the weekend in New York. During another interview, Martin also reportedly admitted to burglarizing the Dollar General store. Needless to say, Martin and Liz never did make it to New York that weekend. Instead, police joked on their Facebook page that the couple were being given different accommodations at the Polk County Jail. According to reports, the couple have each been charged with 1 count of burglary of a residence. Martin has also been charged with burglary and theft related to the Dollar General incident.
Authorities in Fort Myers, Florida are requesting the public's help in the hopes of cracking quite the filthy criminal this week after an unknown man allegedly broke into a local restaurant and defecated on the floor. According to reports, the incident took place in the early morning hours of January 21st at Joe's Crab Shack. After breaking a small window, the suspect was able to gain access to the restaurant by crawling inside. He then helped himself to a variety of items, including alcohol and one of the restaurant's branded hats, which he wore on his head as he walked around. However, it's what the suspect did before leaving the business that has since caused the story to make headlines. In the middle of the restaurant's floor, the man pulled down his shorts and emptied his bowels, leading police to dub him, quote, the pooping perpetrator. Fort Myers police have now released several images of the so-called pooping perpetrator in the hopes that someone out there will recognize him. Anyone with information about the case is encouraged to reach out to Fort Myers police directly or to call Southwest Florida Crime Stoppers. Authorities in Flagler County, Florida say that they received a rather novel excuse from an alleged thief this week after he burglarized a gas station but left something important behind, which he claimed was proof that he never meant to steal anything. According to reports, the incident began in the early morning hours of February 5th when police were called to the scene of a security alarm at a gas station in Palm Coast. They arrived to find the front door to the building unlocked, even though it was supposed to be closed at the time. When officers reviewed surveillance footage at the business, they saw that a man had broken in through the back of the gas station a short time earlier and had grabbed several items, including antifreeze, cigarillos, an e-cigarette, and some dog food. He then left through the store's entrance, leaving the front door unlocked. Thanks to the video footage, police already had a pretty good idea of who was behind the burglary. The suspect looked exactly like 21-year-old Lance Kurtz, who had been involved in a vehicle fire the previous evening. All remaining doubt as to Kurtz's involvement apparently went out the window when police found another interesting piece of evidence at the crime scene. It was Kurtz's debit card, bearing his name, which he allegedly left on the business's counter. Even more bizarrely, when police caught up with Kurtz a short time later, he claimed that leaving behind his debit card hadn't been an accident, he'd done it on purpose. He stated that he had intended to return to the gas station later and pay for what he had taken, and wanted to leave behind his debit card, quote, just so they knew my name, you know? Unfortunately for Kurtz, officers soon explained to him that leaving behind his debit card did not actually absolve him from the burglary he had just committed. He was arrested and charged with armed burglary of a dwelling or structure, as well as petty theft.
Authorities in Martin County, Florida say that a disgruntled Philadelphia Eagles fan got his wings clipped this week after he went full bird brain inside of a local firehouse. According to reports, the incident began just after 10 p.m. when the angry football fan, later identified as 25-year-old Edward D'Alessandro, broke into the Hutchinson Island fire station on Northeast Ocean Boulevard in the city of Stuart. Once inside, the 25-year-old allegedly ransacked the bunk rooms, stole a uniform hat, some knives, and $126 cash. Oh yeah, he also pissed on an area of carpeted floor for some reason. When firefighters confronted D'Alessandro, he responded by throwing a meat cleaver at them. Fortunately, firefighters were able to restrain and hold the 25-year-old until police arrived. D'Alessandro was placed under arrest and is now facing several charges, including armed burglary, aggravated assault on a firefighter, and theft. As for a motive behind the crime, police haven't said for sure, though multiple reports insinuated that it had to do with the Eagles' Super Bowl loss that night. As stupid as that would surely be, it's unclear exactly why D'Alessandro thought the fire department was to blame. Unfortunately, there's no word on whether any of the firefighters were big Kansas City Chiefs fans. At the time of this recording, D'Alessandro remains in custody at the Martin County Jail on a $120,000 bond. Authorities in Seminole County, Florida say that a 24-year-old woman is facing multiple charges this week after she allegedly threatened several fast food workers with a gun and attacked one of them during an argument that started over a cookie. According to reports, the incident took place sometime on February 16th when 24-year-old Amari Hendricks went through the drive-thru at a McDonald's on South State Road 434 in Altamonte Springs. She pulled up to one of the windows and was reportedly in the process of receiving her food when there was a dispute over her order. In short, Hendricks apparently thought she was entitled to a free cookie. Though staff at the drive-thru did cave to the 24-year-old's demands for the cookie eventually, it apparently did nothing to calm the situation. In fact, she only got angrier, allegedly pulling out a black handgun, inserting a magazine, and chambering around before pointing the gun at one of the workers. Several terrified employees ran for cover while one of them went to lock the restaurant's front door. However, by that time, Hendricks had already made her way there and was reportedly able to get inside. She allegedly attacked a male staff member, scratching his face and neck before police could be called to the scene. When officers arrived, Hendricks was still apparently uncooperative, though was eventually taken into custody. She's now facing several charges, including aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, battery, and resisting arrest. Unfortunately, there's no word on whether Hendricks got to eat her free cookie before she was taken to jail. Authorities in Volusia County, Florida say that a man is lucky to be alive this week after he was part of a group of motorcyclists that allegedly pulled dangerous stunts on local roads and ended up getting hit by a truck while trying to flee from police. The incident began sometime on the night of March 3rd when officers from the Volusia County Sheriff's Office spotted a group of motorcycle riders popping wheelies while driving on the Old Dixie Highway. When police attempted to pull the drivers over, they refused to stop, instead speeding up in an attempt to escape. As the chase began, they continued to drive recklessly, weaving in and out of traffic and traveling at high speeds. The pursuit continued until the intersection of North Beach Street and West Granada Boulevard, where the group blew through a red light. That's when one of the suspects, later identified as Joshua Richardson, apparently decided to get cocky. While heading through the intersection, he looked back at police and stuck up his middle finger. Unfortunately for Richardson, he wouldn't be getting the last laugh. While distracted by his own antics, he didn't notice an incoming pickup truck, which T-boned him just seconds later. While Richardson miraculously survived the high-impact collision, his attempts to flee the scene on foot immediately afterwards were short-lived. When police caught up to him and placed him under arrest, he was writhing on the ground. In body camera footage of the incident taken by responding deputies, Richardson could be heard saying that his leg was hurt. Police, understandably, had little sympathy, with one officer saying, quote, "You know how your leg doesn't get hurt? You don't run from the cops and crash your bike." Apparently outraged, Richardson replied, "Do you think this is funny?" Only to be chided by another officer who said, quote, "No, I don't think it's funny. It's incredibly stupid." According to reports, Richardson is now facing a number of charges, including fleeing or attempting to elude law enforcement, resisting without violence, and leaving the scene of a crash. He was also slapped with traffic citations for failure to stop at a red light and passing in a no-pass zone. At the time of this recording, authorities have not stated whether they were able to arrest the other motorcyclists that Richardson was with, or whether there were any other injuries. Authorities in Pinellas County, Florida say that a local woman made her ongoing legal troubles even worse for herself last month when she tried to fraudulently pass a urine test and didn't even bother trying to use actual pee. According to reports, 44-year-old Shannon Hunter already had quite the lengthy rap sheet before any of this went down, though this particular series of events was set off by a pair of recent felony drug and theft charges. As a result of pleading guilty to possessing painkillers without a prescription, she was required to submit to regular urine tests as part of her probation to stay out of jail. The problem was, Hunter never actually stopped using painkillers, so when she was supposed to show up for her first urinalysis test on February 23rd, she knew that her sample would come back dirty, so to speak. That's when she apparently came up with a harebrained scheme to try and keep herself out of trouble. She filled up a prescription bottle with liquid, inserted it into her vagina, and went to the test. Of course, as you might have already guessed, the fine folks who administer these tests weren't born yesterday. They know that people try to cheat, and as it turns out, the old pill bottle in the vagina trick isn't all that original. As a result, Hunter was quickly caught. What was a little more novel, though, was the 44-year-old's choice of liquid. Instead of trying to use clean urine brought or provided by someone else, Hunter reportedly went for a homemade concoction: soda and tap water. It's unclear why Hunter thought this would work, as obviously urinalysis tests are a lot more sophisticated than someone just checking to see if a sample looks like pee. In this case, it's doubtful that the fake urine would have even passed the literal smell test, unless the testers were just supposed to believe that Hunter had like the world's worst case of diabetes. As usual, though, with crimes this ridiculous, we're probably overthinking it. Chances are Hunter just had no idea how the test worked in the first place. She has since pleaded no contest to a misdemeanor charge of urinalysis fraud and was sentenced to 20 days in jail in order to pay court costs totaling $500. Unfortunately, there's no word on what kind of soda she used to try and make her fake pee, though sources have speculated that it was likely Sprite or Mountain Dew. Authorities in Brevard County, Florida say that a 26-year-old woman is facing several charges this week after she was allegedly the latest person to pull a gun on a fast food employee because she got upset while in the drive-thru line. According to reports, the incident took place sometime on March 16th when the suspect, later identified as 26-year-old Quavee Young, pulled up to the drive-thru at a McDonald's location in the city of Cocoa. When it came time to order, she allegedly asked for something that wasn't on the menu. Employees at the restaurant reportedly explained that they wouldn't be able to help Young, something which she apparently already knew because this was actually her second time at the drive-thru that day. However, this time, Young apparently wasn't taking no for an answer. When asked why she was upset, Young allegedly pulled out a handgun, waved it at the worker, and threatened to, quote, push her back. The 26-year-old then reportedly drove to the second drive-thru window with the gun still in her lap. In the meantime, employees called 911. When officers arrived, they found Young in possession of the handgun, which was allegedly equipped with a drum-style magazine capable of carrying 50 rounds of ammunition. Young was arrested and is now facing charges including aggravated assault with a deadly weapon without intent to kill, open carry of a weapon, and driving with a suspended license. Unfortunately, reports do not mention the item that the 26-year-old tried to order that wasn't on the McDonald's menu. Authorities in Brevard County, Florida say that a 39-year-old man is facing charges this week following a strange incident in which he was apparently denied a second turn at a local karaoke bar, and he allegedly responded by pulling out a weapon. According to reports, the incident took place at around 2 p.m. on April 2nd at Kennedy's Lamppost Tavern in Cape Canaveral. The mood was fun and exciting that afternoon, with patrons enjoying a bit of friendly karaoke. That was, until 39-year-old Travis Jordan took the stage. While we unfortunately don't know what Jordan chose for his big number, he apparently thought it was good enough that he deserved an encore. So much so that he allegedly refused to leave the stage and pulled out an 18-inch machete when he was told he couldn't have a second turn. Though most people understandably panicked at the sight of the large bladed weapon, a brave female employee at the bar reportedly managed to talk Jordan down and convince him to hand over the machete peacefully. At the same time, the police were called. When officers arrived, they could instantly tell that Jordan was very drunk. His eyes were bloodshot and glassy, he smelled of alcohol, and he was having difficulty standing. When asked about the machete, he reportedly told police that he kept it on him, quote, because he always needs to stay alert. He was taken into custody at the scene and is now facing a charge of breach of peace disorderly conduct. Following Jordan's arrest, Brevard County Sheriff Wayne Ivey released a post on the department's Facebook page joking about the situation. In it he said, quote, unfortunately, Jordan's actions didn't earn him another song on stage, but they did win him a trip to Ivy's Iron Bar Lodge, where every night is open mic night, and he can sing any song he wants all night long. A Florida dentist ironically praised online for his light touch with patients was apparently anything but gentle last week when he was allegedly behind the savage beating of a Lake County doctor on a local golf course. According to reports, the incident took place sometime on the morning of April 30th when Dr. Joseph Sivak and his wife were on their daily walk in their gated community in the town of Lady Lake. Part of their route takes them through the Harbor Hills golf course, though the couple say that they are always careful to stay on marked paths and to never interfere with golfers. It's for this reason that they were so surprised when on that particular morning as they walked along the course that they heard the irate shouting of a man behind them. That man, later identified as 52-year-old Eddie Orobig, was apparently accusing them of getting in the way of his golf game. Not simply content to shout at the couple, Orobig allegedly escalated things, quickly running up to Sivak and his wife and getting in their faces. After screaming at them some more, the dentist reportedly spat in Sivak's face before attacking him with his hands and a golf club. According to Sivak and his wife, the assault was savage, with Orobig refusing to stop for some time as he hit the doctor over and over again. The beating reportedly left Sivak with broken ribs, a fractured cheekbone, a ripped earlobe, and several cuts and bruises all over his body. All Sivak had to defend himself with was a water bottle, which turned out to be no match for the dentist's golf club. When police arrived at the scene, Sivak was covered in blood and unable to make a verbal statement due to his injuries. Orabig, meanwhile, had allegedly carried on with his golf game as if nothing had happened. As authorities moved in to arrest Orabig, he got agitated once again, questioning why he was being taken into custody. According to reports, Orabig is now facing a felony charge of aggravated battery over the beating, with authorities saying that everyone involved is extremely lucky that things didn't turn out worse. Somewhat amusingly, after news of the story broke, screenshots of Orabig's dental website were taken and posted online, showing a testimonial from a patient who had praised him for his, quote, light touch. Authorities in Volusia County, Florida say that a 20-year-old man is facing numerous charges this week after he allegedly stole a vehicle and crashed it during a police chase, then offered a bizarre excuse for his actions. According to reports, the incident began sometime on the morning of May 10th when officers from the Volusia County Sheriff's Office spotted a stolen SUV being driven in the city of Daytona Beach shores. When police attempted to pull the vehicle over, the driver, later identified as 20-year-old Michael Barr, allegedly took off, leading officers on a short chase before jumping out of the SUV while it was still moving. The vehicle continued until it crashed into a building, and Barr ran from the scene on foot. A short time later, officers were able to locate Barr at a motel on South Atlantic Avenue, where he was placed under arrest. He apparently had a handgun in his possession at the time. The situation grew far stranger, however, when Barr reportedly tried to explain his actions to police. He claimed that the whole thing had happened because he had been ditched by his friends in Miami. Naturally, in his mind, the logical thing to do was to hitchhike to Kissimmee, steal a car, and then drive to Daytona Beach. He said that at the time officers spotted him, he was using the vehicle to search for a Wi-Fi connection. Barr is now facing several charges, including grand theft of a motor vehicle, fleeing or attempting to elude law enforcement, unlawfully carrying a concealed firearm, resisting an officer without violence, driving with a suspended or revoked license, and leaving the scene of a crash with property damage. In a statement, police jokingly mentioned that the 20-year-old will not have a Wi-Fi connection in his jail cell. Representatives from the Orlando Police Department say that one of their officers has been relieved from duty and is facing several charges this week following a strange recent incident in which he was allegedly caught speeding by an officer from a different department and refused to pull over or cooperate. According to reports, the situation unfolded early in the afternoon on June 6th when a deputy with the Seminole County Sheriff's Office spotted an Orlando police SUV whip past him on a rural road. At the time, the Orlando cruiser's lights were not on, meaning that the officer inside was not on his way to the scene of an emergency. Yet, he was still traveling 80 miles per hour in a 45 zone. After turning around, the Seminole County deputy began pursuing the Orlando police officer, later identified as Alexander Shoney. According to the deputy, he needed to drive at speeds of over 100 miles per hour to catch up. However, even when he did, Shoney ignored the deputy's lights and sirens and refused to pull over. When Shoney finally did stop, he was immediately aggressive with the Seminole County deputy, demanding to know what was going on. Body cam footage of their brief exchange has since been released, in which Shoney can be heard angrily saying that he is on his way to work and refusing to hand over his driver's license. He then flees the scene in his vehicle while the deputy calls for backup. According to reports, Shoney was later arrested over the incident and is now facing charges including resisting an officer, reckless driving, and fleeing and eluding a law enforcement officer with active sirens. In a statement, Orlando police also announced that Shoney was relieved of duty pending an investigation. Authorities in Pinellas County, Florida say that a woman is facing charges in connection with a bizarre trespassing case this week after she allegedly made her way onto a U.S. Coast Guard station, stole one of their vehicles, and used it to get onto the runway of an adjacent airport. According to officials from the county sheriff's office, the incident took place sometime last week when the woman, who has not been identified by name, scaled the fence of U.S. Coast Guard Air Station Clearwater. Once on the grounds of the facility, she allegedly stole one of the Coast Guard's tricycles, which is apparently one among a number of different vehicles used by the service to transport equipment and tools around the facility. After stealing the tricycle, the woman reportedly next tried to gain access to one of the Coast Guard's aircrafts, though was unsuccessful. She then drove the stolen tricycle onto the taxiway of the adjacent St. Pete Clearwater International Airport, where she allegedly tried to board an Allegiant airline flight to Argentina. The woman was apparently stopped by employees who noticed her riding past no trespassing signs at Terminal A while watching surveillance cameras. She was placed under arrest and is now facing felony charges for trespassing onto an operational area of an airport and grand theft. Following the bizarre incident, a spokesman for the airport attempted to reassure the public that the Coast Guard facility does its best to maintain necessary safety standards, saying that the incident would be investigated by the TSA. Representatives from Florida's Hernando County Sheriff's Office say that one of their own employees is facing multiple charges this week following a recent incident in which they accidentally shot themselves, then tried to cover up the situation by fabricating a story about an attempted carjacking. The case began sometime on June 30th when 21-year-old Dakota Wood, who at the time worked for the sheriff's office as a telecommunicator, reported that he had been shot during an incident in the community of Spring Hill. Wood said that he had been sitting in his vehicle in Linda Peterson Park when two black men had approached him, pulled out a gun, and threatened him. He claimed that the man had tried to steal his car, and when he resisted, he was shot in the thigh. He said the suspects collected the shell casing and fled the scene, during which time he was able to grab his own weapon and fire several rounds in self-defense. Wood also claimed he was pretty sure he hit one of the men several times. However, while being treated in the hospital for his gunshot wound, Wood's story allegedly fell apart. He later admitted that he made the whole thing up, saying instead that he was upset because of problems he was having with his girlfriend and that he had simply been playing with his gun in the vehicle when it accidentally went off. In a statement after news about the case broke, Sheriff's Office representatives said that these kind of situations were, quote, relatively rare, unfortunate, and unpleasant, and promised that Wood was going to be held accountable. The 21-year-old has since resigned from his position and is now facing charges of tampering with or fabricating physical evidence, false reports of commission of crimes, and discharging a firearm in public or residential property. Authorities in Pinellas County, Florida say that a 46-year-old woman was arrested and is facing charges following an outburst at a local restaurant, during which she allegedly tried to assault someone with quite the unusual projectile, but ended up hitting someone else instead. According to reports, the whole thing went down on the evening of July 12th at a restaurant in St. Pete Beach called Rick's Reef. Patrons were presumably in the middle of enjoying their meals when an altercation broke out between 46-year-old Sarah Ann Cochera and another customer. While it's unclear what started the argument, we do know that things quickly escalated. That's when Cochera allegedly grabbed a burrito she was eating and threw it at the man she was yelling at. Apparently, though, her aim wasn't all that great, because the burrito hit someone else in the face. Though Cochera reportedly fled the scene before police arrived, she didn't get very far before officers found her. She was allegedly quite uncooperative, though eventually was arrested and charged with disorderly conduct. According to reports, this is not the 46-year-old's first brush with the law, or anger management issues for that matter. Just last month, she was arrested for punching her boyfriend in the face during an argument, though charges were apparently dropped at the victim's request. Authorities in Volusia County, Florida were left both relieved and seriously irritated this week after what they initially thought was a terrifying armed kidnapping situation instead turned out to be an 11-year-old girl's idea of a funny joke. According to reports, it all started at around 9:45 a.m. on July 26th, when dispatchers with the Volusia County Sheriff's Office began receiving disturbing texts that had been sent to 911. They were from an 11-year-old girl who said that her 14-year-old friend had been abducted by an unknown armed man in a white van who had proceeded to drive south on Interstate 95 in Oak Hill. Given the seemingly critical nature of the crime, a large police response was mobilized immediately, with officers from multiple different law enforcement agencies sent to help. Air support was even called in an effort to locate the suspect's vehicle faster. Over the next hour or so, dispatchers continued to receive updates from the 11-year-old by text, who provided descriptions of the alleged suspect and said that she was following in a blue Jeep. However, police were unable to find the suspect or the white van in question. They would soon learn that this was because they didn't exist. After tracing the phone that was sending the text messages, officers were able to pinpoint it to an address in the neighboring city of Port Orange. When they paid a visit to the residence, they were greeted by a confused man who turned out to be the father of the 11-year-old girl. He said that she was inside with the rest of the family. Sure enough, when officers went inside, they found the 11-year-old sitting in the living room holding her phone. Moments later, she received a call from 911 dispatchers. When questioned, the girl apparently admitted that she had made the whole thing up, saying that it was a prank inspired by a YouTube challenge she had seen. She said that she, quote, thought it would be funny. Things presumably got less hilarious, though, when she was arrested and charged with making a false police report concerning the use of a firearm in a violent manner and misuse of 911. While police appeared to show some sympathy for the girl given her age, they were quick to note the seriousness with which they treat these kinds of matters, with a representative saying, quote, this kind of prank activity is dangerous. We're going to investigate every incident, but today it wasted valuable resources that might have helped someone else who legitimately needed our help. They also reminded parents to make sure they are closely monitoring their children's social media accounts.
Authorities in Bay County, Florida say that a pair of young women are facing charges this week following a recent incident in which they got into a vicious fight at a 4th of July party, one that ended with a gruesome and rather unusual injury. The situation unfolded just after midnight on July 5th, when police in the city of Callaway received a call about an unsupervised house party being thrown by minors on the 6500 block of Aloki Street. Initially, officers had been informed that there was a fight between several men at the residence. However, when they arrived, they also found themselves in the middle of a violent incident between two women. According to reports, the whole thing began when 23-year-old Macy Regan left the house where the party was happening and began walking back to her own home close by. That's when she was allegedly confronted by 18-year-old Dixie Stiles, who accused her of stealing alcohol and vape pens. Things apparently escalated when Regan pulled out a handgun, prompting Stiles to knock the firearm away and attack. During the middle of the fight, Regan reportedly bit the top of one of Stiles' ears off. Both women were arrested at the scene, and Stiles was reportedly given more bad news later on when she was informed that the missing part of her ear could not be reattached. She has now been charged with battery, touch or strike, while Regan was charged with felony battery causing bodily harm.
Authorities in Hernando County, Florida say that a teenage suspect is facing multiple charges this week after he allegedly carried out a burglary at a business where he was formerly employed, but was busted by his rather distinctive choice of footwear. According to reports, the incident began back on July 20th when police were called about a burglary at a bakery called Crumble Cookies in the city of Brooksville. Someone had stolen a large sum of money from both the business's safe and cash register. Fortunately, it didn't take very long to figure out what had happened when the store's manager reviewed surveillance camera footage taken at the time of the crime. The video showed a suspect dressed in a black mask, black sweatshirt, black pants, a brown and black backpack, and a pair of bright red Crocs. The shoes looked an awful lot like the ones a former employee of theirs always used to wear, 18-year-old Jacob Ortega. Upon reviewing the surveillance footage further, police also spotted a vehicle leaving the parking lot around the time of the burglary, which happened to belong to one of Ortega's friends. During questioning, the friend said that at around 2 a.m. on the morning of the crime, the 18-year-old had asked him for a ride to the area. He had called to be picked up nearby a short time later. Finally, the friend directed police to the glove compartment of the vehicle, where Ortega had allegedly stashed some of the money from the burglary. On August 1st, police brought Ortega in for questioning, who reportedly confessed to what had happened. He said that he decided to steal from the bakery because they hadn't changed the access codes to their side door, safe, or register, and he still remembered them from when he worked there. The 18-year-old also reportedly admitted that he had blown the rest of the cash police hadn't recovered on food and alcohol for him and his friends. Ortega is now facing charges including burglary, grand theft, and unlawful use of a two-way communications device. Unfortunately, it appears that no charges can be pressed against him for purchasing or intentionally wearing a pair of Crocs. Authorities in Volusia County, Florida say that a 35-year-old murder suspect recently landed herself with additional charges after she allegedly made a rather bizarre and brazen attempt to destroy evidence during questioning. The whole thing started at around 1:46 a.m. on July 1st, when police were called with reports of a fire at a residence on the 600 block of Clark Street in Daytona Beach. Officers arrived at the scene to find that a pile of clothes had been set on fire in one of the second-floor bedrooms of the shared residence. However, it was when they extinguished the flames that things really started to get serious. During a search of the property, they found the body of an elderly man lying face down in a blood-spattered room. He had suffered blunt force trauma wounds to the head, as well as stabbing injuries to the torso. After speaking with the property owner, the victim was identified as 79-year-old Michael Sarasoli, one of the tenants who lived there. Michael's cell phone was recovered at the scene, along with another cell phone that had a blood-covered knife on top of it. The landlord said the second phone belonged to the other tenant that lived at the residence, 35-year-old Nicole Max. Roughly 2 hours later, Max was spotted by police walking barefoot and wearing a ripped shirt outside of a fast food restaurant in the neighboring community of Holly Hill. She had blood on her leg, and when officers approached her, Max reportedly dropped a knife and a hammer at their feet. When questioned about what she had been doing that morning, the 35-year-old was reportedly evasive and kept changing her story. At first, she said that she had no connection to Michael or the property where his body was found, at one point saying that she had been homeless for the last 4 years. After admitting that she knew the victim, Max stated that she hadn't seen him that day, before changing again and admitting that Michael was her roommate and that she had been at their shared residence earlier, though claimed that she had only gone up to the second floor to, quote, feed her spiders. After obtaining a warrant to collect DNA evidence from the 35-year-old's body, police reportedly continued their questioning, at which point Max asked for a can of Diet Mountain Dew. Officers obliged, only for Max to play around with the drink for some time before finally attempting to pour it over her body and hair, in what authorities say was an attempt to destroy evidence. While the sucralose in artificial sweeteners has apparently been shown in studies to have the potential to break down the biological components that make up DNA, unfortunately for Max, her alleged attempt was unsuccessful. Samples collected from Max's clothing ended up matching DNA found on Michael's body. It likely wouldn't have mattered either way, though, as Max's DNA was also reportedly found on the handle of the knife that was found at the crime scene. Instead, Max's stunt apparently earned her additional charges of tampering with evidence and resisting arrest with violence, on top of the premeditated first-degree murder charge she was already facing in the case. So far, it appears that the motive behind the murder has not been released. Representatives from Florida's Bay County Sheriff's Office say that a Georgia man is facing numerous charges this week following an equally bizarre and destructive burglary at a local church. The incident began sometime after 8 on the morning of August 4th, when Bay County deputies were called to the Emerald Beach Church of God in the town of Panama City Beach. An employee of the church said that she had fled the property after hearing breaking glass, which she realized was the sound of someone breaking in. Officers reportedly arrived at the scene to find the suspect, later identified as Derek Porter, who was allegedly in the middle of a burglary at the property. After smashing his way inside with a cinder block, authorities say that Porter did roughly $8,000 worth of damage to the church, then loaded several items including a television, a computer, and the church's money bag into his truck. Upon being caught red-handed, Porter apparently stated that he could not remember what had happened during several periods of time while he was in the church, something that might be explained by the methamphetamine that was allegedly found inside his pocket at the scene. However, Porter apparently did remember one thing quite vividly. He said that at one point he had baptized himself in the church's baptistry pool and claimed that something had held his head down in the water. It seems that Porter wasn't the only one who enjoyed the pool, though. Upon being let inside, one of the police dogs who had been brought to the scene immediately made a beeline for the water and jumped in, prompting audible laughs in one of the officers' body cam footage. Porter has now been charged with burglary of an occupied structure, criminal mischief, possession of methamphetamine, and possession of drug paraphernalia in connection with the incident. At the time of the crime, he was reportedly already out on bond for another burglary in Georgia. Authorities in Alachua County, Florida say that a 47-year-old man is facing a number of charges this week after he allegedly stole a piece of heavy machinery and took it on a destructive rampage through a local shopping center. According to reports, the real-life game of Grand Theft Auto unfolded on the night of September 11th when 47-year-old Jesse Charles Smith allegedly hot-wired an excavator somewhere in southwestern Gainesville. Police say that Smith drove the piece of construction equipment through a storage unit before heading out onto local roads where he began taking out power poles. The rampage finally came to an end after Smith arrived at the Butler Plaza shopping center where he plowed the excavator through one of the walls of a Walmart supercenter. Witnesses allegedly saw the 47-year-old hop out of the excavator and run inside the store armed with a machete, though it appears he ditched this by the time he was arrested by police minutes later. Smith is now facing numerous charges, among them grand theft, felony damage to property, and resisting an officer without violence. His bail was set at $160,000, though a judge has since ordered that he be sent for a mental health evaluation before he can be released. Apparently, Smith has a history of theft and burglary convictions in Alachua County dating back at least 5 years, several of which involve the theft of power tools and equipment. A pair of Florida siblings might not be facing charges this week, but they're probably looking at the grounding of the century after they allegedly stole their mom's car and drove it halfway across the state because they were upset over a minor punishment. The whole thing started at around 4 a.m. on September 21st when police in the city of Alachua pulled over a white sedan on Interstate 75 after discovering the vehicle had been reported stolen. It's unclear what officers were expecting to find when they walked up to the car. However, they certainly weren't expecting a 10-year-old boy to be in the driver's seat, or for his 11-year-old sister to be in the passenger seat, for that matter. Police quickly discovered that the siblings were the son and daughter of the vehicle's owner, and that they had also been reported missing. After speaking with the pair, they apparently got the rest of the story. According to reports, the brother and sister lived about a 3 hours drive away in the city of Northport and had stolen their mother's car earlier that morning. Their motive? They were upset because she had recently confiscated their electronic devices because she said they hadn't been using them appropriately. Way to earn mom's trust back, guys. Anyway, police were later able to speak with the kid's mother, who they determined was not mistreating them in any way. She declined to press any charges, prompting police to release the children, since at that point all they could apparently have gotten them on was driving without a license, a misdemeanor offense. Speaking with media after the case, a representative from the sheriff's office stated, quote, "Our detectives did speak with their mother at length, who was clearly doing her best to raise 2 young children, and she was very receptive to the recommendations they provided in helping her get assistance." A 24-year-old Florida man may not have been thinking when he led police on a dangerous high-speed chase this week. However, that apparently didn't stop him from putting his head to another novel use instead. According to reports, the whole thing started in the early morning hours of October 15th, when officers from the Marion County Sheriff's Office spotted a man, later identified as 24-year-old Tyler Faconsolo, leaving a Circle K gas station in the city of Ocala. Immediately after getting out of the parking lot, Faconsolo began driving erratically. He was unable to stay in his lane, and pretty soon was observed running a red light. Suspecting that the 24-year-old was driving under the influence, Marion County Sheriff's officers attempted to conduct a traffic stop. Instead of pulling over, though, Faconsolo sped off, prompting a chase. The pursuit quickly reached speeds of up to 100 miles per hour, as Faconsolo did whatever he could to try and get away. This included swerving between lanes, driving on the wrong side of the road, and even driving over large sections of grass. Despite multiple attempts to end the chase with pit maneuvers and stop sticks, Faconsolo continued driving with 4 flat tires and his rear bumper dragging on the road. It wasn't until he crashed through the fence of a residence that had been laid in concrete that his vehicle was finally immobilized. Even after coming to a stop, though, the 24-year-old wasn't ready to give up just yet. Body cam footage taken by a pursuing officer shows how Faconsolo proceeded to smash the front passenger window of his vehicle with his own head before flopping out onto the ground in what police later described as a dolphin-like manner. While Faconsolo was able to get up onto his feet after this bizarre maneuver and take off running, he didn't make it very far. This was thanks to Jet, one of the Marion County Sheriff's Office's canine officers, who was able to quickly catch up to the 24-year-old and grab him by the leg. After being caught, Faconsolo made one last futile attempt to try and get out of trouble. He claimed that he had been robbed at the gas station where police first saw him, as if this somehow explained his actions. A pretty bad excuse, if you ask me, though the 24-year-old did confess shortly after this at a local hospital that he was, quote, high as so that might explain his lack of quick thinking. Anyway, Faconsolo is now facing multiple charges over the whole incident, including driving under the influence of alcohol or drugs, aggravated fleeing with injury or damage, and resisting without violence.
Authorities in Polk County, Florida say that a serial car burglary suspect is facing a laundry list of new charges this week after he panicked and tried to escape from police, but ended up causing a serious car wreck instead. According to reports, the whole thing started just before 3:30 a.m. on November 13th, when officers with the Polk County Sheriff's Office were called to the neighborhood of Preservation Point, located near the city of Davenport. Witnesses told police that they had seen a man and a woman trying to break into several parked cars there. When officers arrived in the area, they quickly spotted the suspects in question, later identified as 37-year-old Timothy Hogue and 31-year-old Rebecca Kozub. Police attempted to conduct a traffic stop on the white 2006 Cadillac CTS they were traveling in. However, instead of stopping, the pair drove further away into the neighborhood. Knowing that there was only one way in or out of the subdivision, officers did not chase the suspects, who were now speeding up and down the residential roads looking for an escape route. They did not find one. Instead, Hogue ended up slamming into a parked car while trying to get around a police vehicle that was blocking part of the road. Following the dramatic crash, which was partially captured on video, he and Kozub were pulled from the car and taken to be treated for a number of injuries. Perhaps fittingly, it was later discovered that Hogue has a tattoo on his neck that says, quote, all gas, no brakes. At the time of this recording, Hogue has been released from the hospital and is now facing charges including burglary of an unoccupied conveyance, felony petty theft, fleeing to elude, conspiracy to commit burglary, possession of methamphetamine, possession of marijuana, possession of drug paraphernalia, and resisting without violence. Charges against Kozub are still pending, as she is still being treated for injuries sustained in the crash. Following his arrest, Hogue reportedly blamed everything on Kozub, saying that the burglaries were her idea. He said he tried to flee the scene because he, quote, just freaked out. Apparently, both of the suspects have extensive criminal histories. Hogue has a rap sheet of 31 felonies and 18 misdemeanors, while Kozub has 19 felonies and 20 misdemeanors.
Representatives from Florida's Clearwater Police Department say that they arrested a local man in connection with an equally strange and stomach-churning case this week after he was witnessed by officers carrying out a, quote, lewd act on top of a dead marsupial. The whole thing unfolded at around 5:30 p.m. on November 15th when the officers in question were on patrol. That's when 45-year-old Rudy Wilcox allegedly walked up to a dead possum, pulled down his pants, and proceeded to take a shit right on top of the dead animal. According to police, this entire thing happened on a busy street in full view of rush hour traffic, during which time Wilcox, quote, exposed his entire anal region. Despite this, when confronted by officers, the 45-year-old accused them of not being able to see straight. Wilcox was arrested and is now facing a misdemeanor charge of exposure of sexual organs. He was booked into the county jail on a $150 bond. A 39-year-old Florida woman's hide-and-seek skills apparently weren't enough to save her this week when she tried to get creative while avoiding arrest, but police found her anyway. According to reports, authorities in Citrus County had been looking for 39-year-old Stacy Usher since early November when she allegedly violated her parole for convictions related to the sale of fentanyl. For a couple of weeks, police struggled to locate her until they apparently received a tip that she was hiding out at her house. Literally. When officers entered the property on November 22nd, they reportedly found Usher hiding inside the back of a couch. She was arrested after being pulled out from beneath the cushions. Police say that Usher has quite an extensive criminal history, including convictions for fraud, grand theft, and obtaining property by writing a bad check. She is a convicted felon in at least 3 different Florida counties. Before we wrap up, we'd like to take a second to give a huge shout out to everyone who has made it this far into the video. Seriously, thank you so much for watching. If you found today's upload interesting and informative, we'd be honored if you consider liking and subscribing, as well as hitting the notification bell and selecting all notifications to stay up to date with our latest releases. If you're looking for additional ways to help support the channel, we'd love to have you join us over on Patreon. Patrons get ad-free and early access to all of our content, as well as 4 additional stories per week for each of our Crimes of the Week and Crimes of the Week International videos. You can learn more at patreon.com/crimezone, where you'll also find some of the fine folks whose names are currently on screen. All that being said, we understand that not everyone has the means to support financially, and that's totally okay. We appreciate every like, sub, share, and comment that you send our way. Once again, thanks so much everyone, and take care.